Nick Collier here. It's mid-June, actually a little later mid-June, like June 23rd or something like that. Here we are in California, sunny California, and I don't know if you can see it, but it's raining like cats and dogs outside. And, and it's been doing this for about 36 hours now, and it's not giving any signs of letting up. Now, what's happened, interestingly enough, I went in and I'm going to swing the camera up a little bit. I went in for the first time in probably, 5 years. I went in and cleaned the dome and got it fairly cleaned up, because it was raining, and I thought, well, okay, we'll go up there and scrub off some of the dust and dirt and get it cleaned up. Well, guess what? It sprung about 6 leaks. So before winter time, I'm going to have to come back in and seal up these windows. But I found a really good approach, and that is hot glue of all things, and it literally will go in underneath the silicone and seal it. So sometime this summer, I'm going to be getting out the old hot glue guns and taking care of business. But for the moment, we are going to do the fun part of making jewelry, and that is choosing a stone. And I got my stash of stones, and most of these stones I've had for, who knows, 20 years, 25 years, because there was a point where I just continued to buy stones and I never used them. So we'll take off the glass, and we're going to choose a stone that's going to work for us here. And I just like to kind of come in and go, wow, what can I use? What's going to really look good? I don't know, this one here really gets my attention. Now we'll put it on a mirror. Let's see if I can find a mirror. There we go. Because oftentimes a stone looks a little dull till you get it on a piece of get a little reflection behind it, and then you get a little bit of flash out of it. That one kind of looks good. I like that stone. But we're not going to stop there. Let's continue to explore new designs. Certainly a piece of rhodochrosite, which is a very pink color. Beautiful turquoise. I've probably had that stone 20 years for sure. So there's 3 right there. Let's go down into the bottom tray, see if there's something down there that gets our attention. Azurite. This old azurite, amazing stuff. And I got 2 or 3 pieces left. And again, I bought this material. I bought as much of this material as I could get back when, bring that one in close, you can see it. It's just a beautiful stone. And it was like 50 cents a gram, which this probably was a $5 stone. It was just an amazing price. And the thing I haven't liked about this stone is it's off-center. So now that I have a stone cutter, I could come in here and trim this stone a little bit and make something out of that. Now there's a really good choice. And here's some Botswana agate that has a nice look to it. And once again, you put it on a mirror and you get a little bit more action out of it. Of course, a clean mirror wouldn't be a bad idea. Here's a little piece of some kind of agate. And again, let's do the mirror on this one, because that really lights up when you get the mirror going. Geez, I like that one a lot. And I think we've got some decent choices here, and we're going to just kind of look at them and choose one. Let's get it in so we can see it. So we've got these 5 or 6 stones. And I'm really attracted to this little one here. It's a beauty. So I think we're going to go ahead and go with that. Bezel making. Probably the first part of bezel making is to come up with the right material. And bezel is usually pure silver, 999. And the reason why it is because it's very soft and pliable. And with the bezel, you definitely want soft and pliable. See how it just kind of forms. Now, this bezel material has been sitting around a while. Even if it hasn't been sitting around a while, the really important thing to do is take a little steel wool and just scrub the bezel a little bit. And I'm going to do that off of the table, so you're not going to be able to see it. But basically, I just pull the steel wool across the surface of the bezel. You can't really see too much difference, but from here to about here, it's nice and shiny. So, that said, we go ahead. First, I got to get some glasses on, because I can't see anymore. Well, I can see, I just can't get close enough to see this real close work. And I don't know if you can see this, but if you notice, the end of the bezel right there is not exactly at a 90-degree angle, and it really needs to be at a 90-degree angle, because when I come back around, those two ends want to really face up. They want to be perpendicular to one another, or parallel to one another. So just come back in and cut it so that it's even and a 90-degree angle. Now, I also, at this point, also like to kind of come in and just kiss that with a file, just to square up that surface a little bit. And you think, well, that's not that big a deal. But when it comes to soldering, it will be a big deal. If those two surfaces can go together well and butt up really smoothly, then the solder flows very easily. So at this point, then I just put it on the table, and let's start on the wide end here, and just rotate the bezel around. It's a cinch. And trying to keep the bezel from rolling over, because it is very soft and it has a tendency to want to roll. And just forming it around the stone, and there we have pretty much what we want. Now there's a lot of spring action in that, so I come in with a little scribe, and I scribe a line right where they're going to connect. And then when I pop it apart, I still got that line sitting there, and I know exactly where to cut it. Okay, so we bring it back together, just kind of check it out, see that we're good. And we look pretty good, but there's a little bit of a gap up above here, and I'm not sure you can see that. So what I want to do is I want to just take just a little bit more off of this, just to take up that gap. And once again, file it just a little bit. Get that squared up. Now, I'm not going to worry about getting the bezel to fit around that stone perfectly at this point, because later on we mess with that. Right now, I'm worried about getting these two ends to kind of butt up to each other. So just kind of keep bending it and pushing it around until it gets fairly close. There we go. That's pretty good. And then I just come in with the flat nose pliers and grab both sides at one time and squeeze. Just give it a little bit of a squeeze there, and that brings everything in nice and flat. Now you kind of look there and you can see, well, it isn't quite flat, is it? All right, and this is a critical piece. This is what makes or breaks a good bezel, is getting that joint to be as perfect as possible. So just come in and kind of take it to a couple more steps to get it to be flattened out. Now there we go. That's our, let me see if I can get in real close here. And you can see the the edge is pretty flat in there. So we'll take it over the torch and weld her up. Okay, we got the bezel setting flat. We come in with a little bit of flux and we put it, we just kind of jump the gap. Put the flux away, because if we don't, then it dries out. And crank up the torch. Now the torch has been sitting idle for a week or so, so all of the gas has run out. And the gas actually dissipates from the torch itself if the tanks are turned off. So then you got to kind of refill the lines. And these lines are about, I don't know, they're only a couple of feet long to the main line, and then the main line goes back through the building. It might be 30 feet long. But I think we probably got it at this point. There we go. Oops. Okay. And finding easy solder, hard solder. There's hard solder. Once again, as with anything in dealing with silver or gold, is clean off the metal. And this is basically what I did with the bezel. So just kind of pull it across it and give it get all the corrosion off of it. So come in and just pretty much bring everything up to temperature. And with silver and gold, things come up to temperature pretty quickly. And we've got a weld. You can see the fact that the two junctions were perfectly aligned meant that I only had to use just a little bit of solder there, which means that I don't have a lot to clean up later. And that's a plus. Here we are back at the bench, back at the stone. I've kind of cleaned off a little bit of the flux that was built up on the inside of this, just so that it can freely find its way around the stone. And now we got to figure out which part, which direction. There it is, right there. Okay. And then just kind of bring it around and group it around the stone. Now notice this little edge right here has got, it's a little bulgy. So I just kind of come in with the flat of the pliers and square it up a bit. Oops. Now the stone, now the bezel is a little bit loose on the stone, but in some ways that's not a bad thing. It can be loose without being too much of a problem. So now we can decide what kind of design we want here, and that's going to be, I think I want something fairly simple with this design. I was looking at this earlier. That would be interesting, wouldn't it? Something like that. But it's a pretty complicated design for such a small stone. I mean, not a small stone, but an uncomplicated stone. So we're not going to play with that right now. But let's just get a piece of backing material. See if I can find something. There we go. 26. 24. And basically we just kind of come in and scribe off, or I sometimes use a pen if I can find a pen. Do I have one? I know I have one. There it is. Just take a pen and strike a couple of lines in this material. Now before I do anything with this, notice that it's got a little bit of a snap to it because it got hammered a little bit at one point. Now that's okay because we're just going to build a bezel, so it's not going to be a big problem. But once again, taking the steel wool and cleaning off the one corner that I'm going to use. And of course I just lost my little lines, but you know, I don't think that's going to be a huge deal here. And I always leave myself a lot extra, because sometimes I'll put a little bezel or a little ring around the piece or something like that, and I just, you know, it isn't that much material, and it's always easier to remove material than try to add it later. So we've got a nice little flat piece. Now I'm going to take it over on the anvil. Actually, I could just bring the anvil over, because it's a little dinky anvil. And just basically flattening the silver a little bit, just so it has a nice flat surface to work from. Okay, now this is the side that's clean, yes. This goes there, and let's do it this way. There we go. Now, this could work just like it is, and most, you know, when I was doing production jewelry, I didn't do the cleanup work. I just would slam in a bunch of silver solder and it would fill in all the gaps. But these days I like to kind of take my time and go a little slower, so I oftentimes come in and just kiss this back edge so that it flattens it and it makes a really tight seam for the edge itself. Notice how I'm continuing to rotate my bezel as I'm filing, and I'm not pushing hard with the file, I'm just barely pushing. A little bit more on that outer corner there. Alright, so now we've got a nice flat surface on a nice flat surface. So one thing is we don't have to use a lot of solder, and the less solder you use, the better. So we're going to take this back over to the torch, to the welding table, and we'll be back in a second. That's a pretty good surface there, and if you weld it straight on the charcoal block, which you can, then it takes a bit of energy to get the weld to take. Whereas if you set it up on a little screen like that, the weld takes a lot quicker. You use a lot less torch, mostly use a lot less time. So here we go. We come back in with some flux. We flux the perimeter. Now that flux is getting pretty thick, but I think it'll be fine. And you notice how I'm just kind of moving the piece around so that the flux can kind of get everywhere. All right, little torch work. It's a cakewalk. Now this time we're going to use medium solder, because the first time we used hard solder, and hard solder melts at the highest temperature, whereas, and I'm trying to find some medium solder, whereas medium solder melts at a little bit lower temperature. There we go. And so consequently, you can melt the medium solder and not melt the hard solder. So the joint between the bezel isn't going to melt, because the medium solder melts at, I think it's at like 50 degrees less temperature, which is makes it usable. Okay, we're going to come in, heat everything up, and I like to just drip a little piece of solder in the center, just so that it tells me when everything is coming to temperature. Now you can tell when things come to temperature by the color too. See how it's starting to turn darkish? So we're getting fairly close to a melting temperature here. But again, I always kind of, now see how it's starting to turn white? that means we're really starting to get close. And there it starts to go. We'll bring in a little bit more solder and take it up against that edge. And then you can just kind of heat it and draw the solder all the way around. A little bit more here. There it goes. Now we've drawn the solder all the way around. Everything is running evenly. And that's it. Looks simple, doesn't it? Well, it is fairly simple. There's a lot of tricks. One of them is using this screen. And quench it. And let's take her back over to the other bench. Back and forth, back and forth. But you know, it does give me the opportunity for a slight amount of exercise. Some jewelers set their bench up so that, they're sitting in one place all day long. And boy, I just can't do that. I got to be able to get up, move around. And having my welding table across the room gives me that opportunity. Okay, so we've got a bezel. Now what I want to do is I want to put a nice rib around the bezel. Probably something like that. Can you see it? Yeah, that's going to look good. It's going to give the bezel and the backing a little more dimension. So let's go ahead and start with this end. And notice how there's just a little kink right there. So I want to start with a very fresh edge. So I'll cut that little edge off. Now, this little piece of metal is, of course, wasted, except it goes back in the tray and gets recycled later on into either melted down into some other object. So we've got kind of laid in there. Notice how there's just a little bit of a gap there, so I don't want to take that gap out. So just kind of keep playing with it until everything matches. There we go. So then come in and mark my metal just about where I think the bend is going to take place. That's like the center of the bend. All right? So then come in, and knowing that that's going to be the center of the bend, I start just behind it a little bit and bend it around. Let's see what that did. Okay, at this point, I'm seeing that it's just a little bit long, so then I can just kind of come in and grab it at the bend itself and bend this a little further and get it to come in pretty close. Now it's still just a bit long, so I can just kind of grab it right at the bend and squeeze, and that kind of takes up the slack a tad more. Well, it's still doing it. Okay, let's take a little bit more. There we go. So now it's having a hard time getting around that bend. You can see it kind of flexing a little bit. So that's perfect, because all we got to do is bring it back just a tad, and it'll make it right around that bend nicely. Okay, so that our line was just a little bit the other side of the bend. So now we can grab it right in the middle of the bend and see if we can get this next line to kind of go. There we go. Yeah, that looks good. And just a little bit of bend. Just a bit of an arch right there. You can kind of see that. And again, coming back in, let's make our line a little bit closer in. looks good. Okay, and it's pulling away here, so I think I can just about bend it in. And I'm going to get flex. So I'll take it off. Bring it in just a little bit. There we go. Nice. Okay, good fit. Okay, we're getting close. Same thing, come in, put our line in about halfway around that bend, and then we pretty much know where the bend is going to go. And I just kind of come in below the last line. Now I might have screwed that one up. It might be just a bit tight. Okay, let's just open it up a little bit. See what happens. Yeah. Okay.